Jerry Branstetter, and in 2009, a television series on the Discovery Channel was born called American Loggers. Now this show illustrated how logging companies take trees out from the forest and then they sell it to buyers to produce further products. I felt that there was a gap in this, that this show showed the logs taken from the land and then sold, but it didn't show what happened after that. So I thought, why not fill the gap? So there's a sawmill based out of Winslow, Arkansas, which is a small town just out of Fayetteville, just a little bit south. And this shows exactly how those trees are taken after they're harvested from the land and turned into something that can be used later on.
Most all of you know that people cut down trees from the forest to make lumber like what you see here. But do any of you know how? Well, today we're going to take a trip to Arkansas to show you just exactly how they take trees from the forest and turn them into products like this wooden pallet and the 1x4 boards below it. Buried deep in the Ozarks of Arkansas is the small town of Winslow, with a population of just under 400 people. Joe Norman is the operations manager for KFI, a traditional yet modern sawmill. As the morning fire dies down, it's time to start the mill for today's lumber.
All right, boys, let's go to work.
All right.
Let's go.
Once the mill is under full power and Joe is in the operating cab, he saws the logs from yesterday. The loader operator keeps feeding more logs onto the conveyor belt while they wait for today's truck to arrive. Once the log truck comes in, the loader operator unloads the logs starting at the top and working his way down to the bottom. Joe measures each log using a Doyle scale. The size of the log gives him an estimate of the finished product he can produce. Each log is measured, tagged with paint, and then documented by his lumber stacker, Cahill. The modern equipment and ways of today makes the work around a sawmill much easier than what Joe's family had when he was younger. Each limb had to be removed by hand using chainsaws. After that process, the logs were cut by Joe's older brother in order to fit onto the logging trucks. Logs were then loaded onto the trucks using an early generation boom loader. Logging trucks were much smaller then and were forced to make several trips. Once at the mill, two men would unload all the logs by hand and a forklift would move them over to the saw. The old sawmills were completely uncovered from the elements, and the sawyer running the saw had to stand very close to control the levers, and logs were manually turned by hand. Joe's father, Daniel, started logging cypress trees in 1952 when he was just 16, and let Joe get involved when he was just a boy. Their bond still holds true today, as Daniel still comes to visit the mill. But today, this mill is nothing short of a machinery marvel. Besides a climate-controlled cab, chains and hydraulic cylinders turn, adjust, and saw each log at the push of a button. Once each pass is made, the log is then rolled in order to saw off all the bark. The lever to Joe's left pushes each log through the saw and then back, while the right one rolls and adjusts every intricate detail of the log's position. Now it's time to saw the log into pieces of valuable lumber. The first person along the lumber line is the slab stacker. His job is to take the remaining pieces that contain bark called slabs and stack them to be sold for charcoal. The quality lumber is then sent down to the lumber stacker. He inspects each individual board to determine its quality and stacks it into the appropriate pile. Throughout the day, the loader operator moves around the logs, keeping Joe a constant supply for the saw. Each pass of the saw cuts not only through, but also into the side of the log to get each board. The quality of each board determines its use. Lower quality boards are used for wooden pallets, while the higher grades are measured and used for lumber stores and furniture. The sawmill's most profitable product are the cross ties. With about an 8-inch diameter and just under 9 feet in length, they are also the longest. The lumber stacker positions each log and uses a chainsaw to cut off the excess length. Once the tie is cut to length, a blade is then used to trim the bark off of the tie. A clean product means a better and more profitable sale to the buyer. The tie is then carefully dropped onto the stack with the others and neatly slid into position. Once a full stack is complete, a metal band is then placed around the stack and clamped down to be moved to the other end of the property with the loader. With such a heavy load, the operator must carefully maneuver the ties to keep them from shifting. The ties are slowly lifted and then carried to the opposite end where the weekly buyers come to pick up all lumber orders. These ties will be purchased to make railroad ties under train tracks. Once the saw has been shut off for the day, a tractor is used to pick up the sawdust. It's then taken outside to be put on the sawdust pile to be sold to farmers as the day comes to a close at KFI.
Well, what do you think? Not exactly something you can do with a chainsaw in the backyard now, is it? Now, I don't know about you, but I'm gonna leave this job to the professionals. Much less likely to lose an arm or leg. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Tell you firsthand, if you want to get comfortable with your video equipment, get dropped off out in the boondocks of Arkansas. They don't even have a restroom on their actual sawmill over there. No restroom whatsoever. You're out there in God's great open, and that's all you got. But it was a super fun project, and I can't wait to go back and do more to further illustrate what they have and do something much longer than what was required for this project. Is there any questions?
I have questions about some of the camera shots.
Yes.
Some of the shots that you're able to get, not only with them in the CAD, but some of the shots where the logs were coming this way, you're shooting from way up here.
Mhm.
How did you do that?
From the logs on the loader, or are you talking?
But
what
the logs would
were
come
in?
forward, but they were way down here, and you were shooting way up
I
here.
used the drone helicopter. It actually raised that
wow.
and got some footage of
Your
it.
footage is incredible.
The trouble with it was super windy that day, and that drone, they weigh under 5 pounds. So the least little bit of wind just shifted.
That's how you were able to do the circular stuff, like that was almost like the 360 turnaround, using that. I loved it when you showed him little and then showed a picture of him with his dad today. I mean, that stuff looks like stuff you see on TV. You need to go to Wintercom and sell this today. It's so good. Really excellent.
A lot of if it hadn't been for some of the different cameras that we used, because see, we weren't, for liability reasons, we weren't allowed to get sometimes within certain distances, especially the saw. And when the shots that I got in the cab, he's literally working right here, and I am scooched down with my hind end against the door.
Because I
And
know it's not that much room, but just watching him maneuver that stuff and then actually showing it.
it's incredible.
It was.
It's almost, it's beginning to get second nature to him, which he's done it his whole life. And he actually started at 20 years old. He lived in Florida at 20 years old, before he even went to college, and was the lead operator at a mill just like this. making over $100,000 a year.
Wow.
Yes.
Jerry, there was one point at which sawdust was flying in my face, and yet it didn't hurt. How did you accomplish that?
Very, very good point of focus on the camera. We feel that might have been part of the reason why one of the cameras my personal camera that I was using, it quit during the production.
So did you turn it on and run out of there, or?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I'm worried about eye damage.
Eye damage? No. I wore my sunglasses most of the time, but I wear my safety glasses most of the time, and we just had to use the zoom on the camera. So
How many hours were you there, do you think, total?
we were there, I think, about 7 hours. We shot it all in one day. I am good friends with a photographer, which she had never done video before. And I said, you have a camera with a $9,000 lens on it, why are you not doing video? And so I called her up one day, I said, hey, I'll compensate you for this, let's take a road trip. And we got really fortunate that we were able to get it all in one day, because since then they haven't worked half the time because there's so much snow on the ground from the last few weeks. And there's so much mud there that it holds so much water they can't work because the trucks can't move around.
You really found a niche though, because that's a good question. You know, again, I don't want these people that watch all those types of shows, and Alaskan shows too. So I can see something, you can see something about Alaska very easily.
He's wanting me to produce a much longer sizzle reel to send to different television companies that do the same thing. So he can be, have you ever seen Swamp People?
Oh, yeah.
When they have, it's one show, but they have several different people in different locations. So he wants to be a branch of one of those.
Because you're answering a question that has not been answered yet. You know, in all these other shows that we see.
Right.
You know, and that was really, really, really brilliant to come out with that.
Thank you.
Excellent job.
Yes. Anybody else?
Very appropriate music choice.
Yeah.
Thanks. I come from a country background, obviously, with foods, but I had to add the banjo at the end of it. Couldn't help it.
So who was your musician?
The musician his name is Jason Shaw, and I obtained a copyright release from him, and basically he builds computer-generated music. There's all types of kinds that you can use, and he granted me rights to use those music, to use his music.
Jerry, you talked about maybe this becoming a reality show, and for one of those, the humor element, the natural humor element would be needed. Do you see potential with this particular mill to be able to get you? I'm not saying Duck Dynasty,
Right.
because that can, maybe be contrived. You may not want to do contrived humor, but is there enough natural humor, do you think, to?
Oh, for sure. There's actually this company is called KFI. It stands for Kingdom First Industries. The owner of the whole, Joe was just the operations manager. The actual owner of the company, he's a very religious human being, hence the name Kingdom First Industries. And the logs that they get actually come from the other branch of their company that actually takes them from the trees. So not only do you have the aspect of what Joe has to offer at his mill location, but also what they have to offer. And during the time that I was there was a few times where they had it wasn't necessarily some huge disagreements, but there's always something going around there day to day that could really add to entertainment on television, as well as information.
Are they teasing each other? What's
Oh yeah, they're like a big happy family. Brent, who's the lumber stacker, he actually used to be a bartender a long time ago. And Joe called him up. He was out of a job. Joe called him up and said, "Hey," he said, "why don't you come down here or be my slab stacker?" And you can tell that he's used to working in an area where you had to keep everything clean all the time. He is constantly running around cleaning this, cleaning that. And Cahill, he's a young kid. They're all the time giving him 8 kinds of heck about everything. Because he'll stack a board in the wrong pile, or he'll do this, and Joe will have to come out of the cab. And they're just a great group of guys. It's a lot of fun. I enjoy being there.
8 kinds of heck. I like that.
That's a country term.
I know.
One more question for you, Jerry. What is the access link? I don't know what that means.
Pardon?
You refer to the access link.
Access. Oh, that's my country accent taking a hold of me. The excess length off of the when a tie. Sometimes country boy can't help it.
Access.
It's kind of like used to could. Like, can you still do that? Well, I used to could. I don't know if I can now.
We have time for one more question.
Can't wait to see on TV.
Yeah.
If
I don't
you
need to
last
on
one,
TV. Did you
no.
see that face? Yeah, that's great.